Boom.
Hey everyone, welcome to Self-Publishing Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about working through a difficult story. You at any point you can hit a stall, even if you think that you're rolling, and what do you do at that point? Or we could talk about Dave's Coke habit.
I would like to talk about Dave's Coke habit, actually.
My Diet Coke habit.
Ooh.
We have a really good scene in a book all about Coke. True story.
If you're talking about cocaine, that would not be my drug of choice.
We know you're an opiate fan. No. Actually, Coca-Cola.
Too many times for it to be casual.
Yeah, I think that 80% of listeners know that you prefer opiates.
Right. I was just going to say, if we did a poll amongst SPP listeners, and one of the questions was, what is Dave's favorite breed of drugs? They'd be like opiates.
Of course.
I bet you. Actually, hey, Christine, how do you like the idea of polling the audience next time? If Dave was going to take drugs, what would he take? Make sure that opiates is one of the choices. I guarantee you will have like 90% accuracy on that.
So, wow, what show are we doing again?
That's what we're going to work on. That's what we're going to talk about today. But I will mention that if you don't listen to Worst Show Ever, first of all, don't. But the most recent one was the return of Dave clips. And that's really amusing. So,
oh, that's awesome.
There's a chance to get in on that. But yeah, so we'll be talking about that. But I think first we want to talk about things that are cool.
Well, I want to go first because this is actually both something cool and something that Dave will never get the joy of, which is also cool. And
this could be so many things.
Yeah, this could be so many things. And also, I think we could do a follow-up. It's been about a year since we discovered this particular thing about Dave. And because of my something cool today, we can actually do a follow-up on Worst Show Ever. So,
oh boy,
it's season 2 of Masters of None.
Oh God.
Oh, I've been wondering about getting into that. Hey, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I interrupt your something cool for something I forgot to mention up top? And that's the Zoom chat crap.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. So basically, Jen on our team has been contacting Zoom about that. And so, if any of you are in the live chat and you can't make it work, well, that's kind of like it's a known thing and it's not something we can do a lot about. You can still submit questions, you just can't chat amongst yourselves. So I just wanted to let you know that because it always comes up.
Well, so I see people saying to everyone. Some are saying to all panelists.
Yeah, it's hit or miss. So there you go.
But we're on it is the point.
Yes.
So anyway, a year ago with season 1 of Masters of None, we found out that Dave does not like Aziz Ansari. Now, there's no reason for it other than his mild racism, but
mild.
Well, in Dave's words, I can't understand it. Maybe it's his eyes. I don't know what it is.
I did not know. No, I did not say that. It was his eyes. I said it was his voice. His voice annoys me.
Oh, but even if I said no, because we talked about this, even if you had it on mute and you're just watching subtitles, he still bothers you.
Yeah, there's something about him that does bother me, but that's not a race thing. Like
on a gut level, based on his appearance, I don't know what it sounds like to me. Anyway,
to be fair, I also thought the same thing about my best friend in the world that died, who was a little skinny white dude. So maybe it's skinny dudes.
Maybe
short, skinny dudes
who try to be funny. Maybe that's it, right?
That might be it.
He does try hard, you can tell. Anyway, Dave's hatred / fear of Aziz Ansari has been one of my favorite things in the last.
I would call it a phobia.
A phobia of Aziz, and I can't help but have that color my experience of Masters of None season 2 a little bit. It's like I'm watching it with Dave in bed with us. It's really awesome.
Are you sure he wasn't there?
Anyway,
where are my hands?
Season 1 was really good. I liked it a lot, but season 2 is really special. There's a couple of episodes that just do really awesome things, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody who's watching or who wants to watch it. But basically, it's a good. Okay, so Louis, what I love about the show Louis is that Louis C.K. really, it's not like a normal sitcom where it's the same every week. It really is different. They're almost like essays, and he's really unafraid to color outside the lines. Okay, this is that same thing, but Aziz is much, much better at it than Louis is. I love Louis. I think Louis is a better comedian, but Aziz, as far as what he's trying to deliver to the viewer, it's sharp. It's really, really good. And I'm just really impressed, and I'm really enjoying it. And Dave can't enjoy it with us.
Oh, his season 2 stopped being funny in the way I enjoyed with 1, and now it's just gonna be fucking uncomfortable, and I'm gonna have to not watch it. Like,
no, not at all. It's not the uncomfortable stuff. He doesn't focus on that at all. It's more just that he takes real chances in storytelling, and that no 2 episodes are the same. And one was like, it's a little like Karma. One was 25 minutes, and the one I watched last night was an hour and 5 minutes. Like,
it was him just lotioning his feet for an hour.
Be consistent. The first episode of season 2 is in black and white and plays off the bicycle thief and takes place in Italy. It's very different. It's a different show. And I love how from season 1 to 2, I can really see his voice developing, and he's trying new things. And I love that he's out there doing that. And I love that Netflix is an environment that really supports that kind of artistic growth.
Does his voice grow in such a way that it irritates Dave more?
I wish, but no, it seems consistent with the first season.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. All right, my something cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Okay.
Because mine may be an anticlimax, so we'll see.
All right. My something cool is right now the NBA the finals are on. It's Cleveland Warriors versus Cleveland Cavaliers versus Golden State Warriors. And my son's a big fan of the Warriors, and last year Cleveland won in the final game. The Warriors were up 3-1 and let Cleveland come back. It was a horrible game. So now there's like it's an awesome rematch, and these two teams have been almost, well, Cleveland lost 1 on the way to the finals. Golden State was perfect. So it's going to be a great series, I think. Although last night, the first game, Golden State blew out Cleveland by more than 20 points. So it wasn't nearly as much fun as I had hoped it would be to watch. But even more interesting than that, though, I think LeBron James, his family, that their huge mansion or whatever it is, and I guess it's in somewhere in Ohio. Somebody had spray painted the N-word on the front of his gate, like the night before the first game, or 2 nights before.
Wow, I've not heard this.
Yeah, so he came out, and he in a press conference. I think it was just like the normal press conferences they have before the series begins. He was talking about racism in America, and he basically said, the fact that, no matter what you do, no matter how much you do, to some people you'll always be that. And it just shows like how far we still have to go. And it was a great, it wasn't a speech. It was just a great conversation starter. I really like the way that he embraced this. So many athletes in the past, like anytime racism popped up, they ran the other way, whether they were white or black. No matter how much of an idol, like Michael Jordan was like an idol to many, but he didn't really get involved when it came to matters of race. And they had a platform, and they didn't stand up and do anything with it. And a lot of people have been like kind of critical of that. And there was this thing I heard on the news where Michael Jordan supposedly said, well, Republicans buy shoes too. That's why he didn't say anything. He didn't want to offend anybody. He didn't want to offend anybody in his audience. And I can understand that. You don't want to offend half your audience. And I think it's pretty bold of LeBron to like not care. Like there's a few times that something's come up, and he didn't care. He didn't care about the money. He didn't care about that. He took the platform, and he said what needed to be said. And I find that very admirable, even if I'm rooting against him. and it's kind of hard to root against him, like feeling like this awesome thing towards him. Like part of me wants him to win, even though, I like Golden State. So, but I thought that was really awesome.
So Dave, something cool is racism?
Yeah, that's it. You got that. You got it.
Awesome.
Hundreds more years.
Oh, wow. Dave can always go farther. It really doesn't matter where you stop. Dave can he can go another few hundred feet always.
All right, so here's mine, and like I said, this may be an anticlimax because there was basically 50-50 split between the three of us with ambivalence and so forth. I know that that's not technically possible, but we were all certain degrees uncertain as to whether I've mentioned this before. So, in other words, I may have already given this as my something cool. Sean said he thought yes, Dave said he thought no, and I was down the middle.
To be fair, I never listened to the show.
Right, Dave never listens.
But you were at the show. You were.
That doesn't mean anything.
That doesn't mean anything.
All right, so I'm going. I just wanted to let you guys know, and maybe again, that Sean and I are going to be speaking at NINC, Novelist Inc. in November. Is it?
It's October.
Well, I'm not in charge of scheduling this one. Like, go find out where NINC is. But that's
it's the first week of October.
Yeah, and we're gonna be featured speakers for First Word, which is their big open, like before. It's not just conference members; it's the big opening day thing, and that's kind of a big deal. Like, we'll be up there for 2 hours, and then we have other things that we're gonna do too. Supposedly, it's not all finalized in terms of like workshops / panels / smaller presentations, whatever.
Yeah, I wasn't invited, but I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna stand in the back and like heckle you all.
Oh, I'm sure you are nominally invited. It's just that everybody assumed you wouldn't want to go.
Yeah. Well, I'm not actually gonna go.
Right. You do know it is in Florida. You could drive there.
It is? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I will go.
Well, but look at where it is, Dave. So just.
Oh, okay. I'll find out.
Yeah. So that's it. I don't know. Again, I don't know. Like, maybe.
I love chat. New clue: driving distance.
Well, and Johnny indicated that it may be a factor. So
they're triangulating. It's only a matter of time, Dave. You need to come to Austin before they triangulate.
It's like when people tried to figure out how what state the Simpsons lived in. You know. All right, so let's go ahead and move into the today's topic, which is the whole idea of working through a difficult story. I mentioned this a little bit before, as just a comment on one of our other topics, and it was the book that I'm working on right now. It's the third in a trilogy that we have not intentionally announced, although I've slipped a few times. But it's going to be coming out in August, I believe, that we're releasing the first book. It's very, to market. It should do well. It's very realm and sans, but it's also it's a a genetic engineering thriller, basically. And we wrote the first book as when we were doing The Apprentice. And then we wrote the second book shortly thereafter. And then there was like this long break where we had other things that we were writing. And then I came back to it, and it's just been a dirge. Like, it's just
I've literally never seen Johnny more miserable during a project. There was was it Judgment was really hard, and it was while he was moving last year. So that was hard for two reasons. But this has just just been rough. I've had more I hate shit slaps than anything else.
And I think that there are a few pieces to this, and maybe we can pull these out as lessons. I mean, I have one main lesson that I think is to take from this, but it was a year. So just the sheer breadth of time that had passed. I think that we've had some sort of formative things during that year. Sean and I went to the story conference, and we've been writing scripts and stuff. And so I think that we have changed, as well as sort of the project itself has changed. Like, it was going to be a 7-book series, and then it was going to be a 5-book series. And then we said, you know what, this is a trilogy, but we had spun things out in 1 and 2 such that we were planning for a longer arc. And then we said, okay, well, this doesn't make sense. And the story really wants to be told this way. So I had to go back through book 1 and 2 and then write 3. And it's just been, I've been at third or less quarter capacity overall until this past, the past 2 weeks. I've been able to write reasonably up to speed. But before that, it was just like this never-ending drudgery, and I did not enjoy it. By the way, I think it's actually turned out really well. Not especially now that things are going. Sean tells me that it reads well, but the process of writing has never been less enjoyable for me. And so I know that a lot of you either write that way every day, Dave.
Yeah.
Dave is like, these are what I call my days.
Or experience a project.
Why is writing ever a joy? Come on.
Dave's like, I wish I could be, because Johnny, you just described the misery, but at least you're still getting the words in consistently, right? So Dave's like, I would trade up. That sounds awesome.
But there have been a bunch of days where I will do 10 to 20% of what I had planned, and that just feels terrible. Like I just feel like shit's chasing me, and then deadlines get pushed back. Sean thought it was really funny once that I was like, I don't miss deadlines, bitch. And guess what? I've missed about 1,000 deadlines with this project.
Yay.
Well, there you go. I'm sure that everybody's really
We'll call this one Johnny Becomes Dave.
right.
I'm not even kidding
that
about
has
this.
happened a little bit recently.
No, yeah. So we're using this software called 15.5 within the community. Within the company, that basically allows us to communicate with each other as a team. This is what's working. This is what's not working.
Accountability stuff.
Yeah, it's accountability. This is how I'm feeling.
So
And Dave,
annoying.
literally a couple of weeks says, I'm a 4 out of 5 while he's climbing and Johnny's, descending. And last week, you can give high fives to other people in the company. And Dave gave Johnny a high five for having a shitty week and making him feel good.
Yeah, he did. He said, thanks for the opportunity to be Johnny. Well, you can be Dave for a while. It's like that Freaky Friday movie, if you remember that. Or the many copycats that came out in the late 80s. So vice versa.
I would like to see a Freaky Friday involving me and Johnny.
I'm totally down for writing that.
So, but yeah, actually that week, what's funny about that is there's another level to it. So Dave was a 4 and he was very exuberant. And then mine was, I said I was a 3, which is already kind of like down. Usually I'm a 4 or 5, and I was a 3. And then what I wrote to Sean was I said, look, I'm going to be honest. I realize this is how I'm feeling just right now, right today. But yesterday it would have been a 2, which is a very Dave thing to say.
Well, Dave's first one, just while we're on this, Dave's first one was a 2. And then at the end he said, well, it's really a 1, but I didn't want you to be mad at me.
So moving away from 55s, but that's the point. Is it's like if you're a writer for whom this sort of thing is normally fun and comes easily, and then you hit something like this, it's so different and it's demoralizing, and it kind of makes you go, well, what the fuck? Like, why am I doing this? This sucks. It's really hard. How am I going to get through it?
It's really cancerous too, because it spreads, and then you feel like it's the opposite of momentum. When you're rolling, the days will get easier and easier and easier, but then if you're having a hiccup, it turns into a cough, and then all of a sudden you're broken.
And
you got the flu, and it spreads, and it kills half of the United States.
Super flu, like in the stand. It did perpetuate, because each subsequent day that I hadn't had a good day, it was reverse momentum. It was like I didn't want to sit down. I didn't want to work on it. I was finding every way to distract myself. This morning, I needed to do something at my desktop that required the internet. I just ran along on writing an email. And so I was going to go upstairs, and I was like, oh, well, no, because I had to cut myself off. I have that Freedom app that shuts off your internet. And I had to remove the
sounds like the opposite of freedom.
Like I had to remove my options, because I was like, well, shit, I guess I can't use it. But that's the sort of thing I had to do, because I was constantly like, well, let me see what I can do now. And I'd have 2 hours left in my writing block and be like, well, hell, that's the best I'm going to do. And I'd quit for the day. So that's what we wanted to talk about today, is just sort of how to battle that. So I'll pause.
Edward Antrobos commented, he said, I call that feeling the start of every book.
Well, and I do feel it at the start of in the good books sometimes too, for sure.
Yeah, but I think that as we're trying to systematize more things and get better at them, it makes sense to ask these questions. That what are the things that are holding us back? What are the things that are holding us from either not telling the stories that we want to tell, not telling them as well as we want to tell them, or not telling them at the speed with which we know inside we're capable of telling them. And so it's good to have these autopsies, because that's how we get better.
Right. So the first thing, and this should be like 101. Like you're going to be like, if I've been listening to the show for 260 episodes or something, and this is really the epiphany that you're going to have now, Johnny, after 5 years of SPP or whatever it is. But it's like, the better the planning is, the better the writing is. And what's weird is, like, we thought we had that handled, and we did in a 1.0 way. So, we used to just write out our beats, and now that we have Story Shop, like Sean he'll create everything in Story Shop and hand it over to me. And it's been kind of a rubber stamp, basically. Like, oh yeah, I know I can roll with that. And sometimes I stay close to the beats, and sometimes I divert from the beats. But what happened in this case was I diverted from the beats enough that I had to improvise too much on the fly. And the first real breakthrough that we had was a story meeting where basically what we did was decided the next series of events, like down to brass tacks, like what was specifically the sort of thing that happened next. This, this character is going to do this. This character is going to do this. And a lot of that I ended up doing on my own, to really put a fine point on it. After that meeting, after a frustrating day where I got a little bit and then I stopped again, was, okay, I really, really need to sit down knowing literally exactly what's going to happen. And pantsing was really my enemy at that point. I had to eliminate all that, and I had to be much more plotted.
So, Dave, I know this is really regular for you. So what's changed? I know that we're not using titles here, but we're in the second book of a series. And
Let's call it New Jersey.
Okay, New Jersey. So we're in the second book in the New Jersey series. And the first book was, I think, the most painless, effortless I've seen you write. Is that true?
Probably, yeah.
So he was only screaming like 10% of the time.
I don't think he screamed much. He was pretty happy during that. He was ready to start. He started.
It's easy to start a series, though. It's very easy to start a series.
Okay, well, how are you feeling now with the second book in contrast?
I feel good about the overall story. The only problems I'm getting hung up on are like procedural problems. There is police work involved there's a lot of stuff that I know, but there's a lot of stuff I don't know, and I don't want to mess it up. I want it to be correct. It's not a procedural. I don't think it's a procedural straight up, but it's got some of those elements to it. And I want to make sure, that everything is like, if somebody is reading and either they're a cop or they know, how police work, they're not like, oh my God, what the hell is this? And just throw the book away. There's got to be some authenticity to it.
So, but that's not really, okay. Well, let me ask this. How many of those issues were problems in the outline phase versus in the draft phase?
Not at all in the outline phase.
Is that because you couldn't see them coming?
Well, some of it is that, but part of it is that, like I didn't think like when I'm outlining, I'm thinking through like general, like larger storyline issues, like the main flow. So like maybe like an arc rather than like specific episodes or chapters. But then when I get into it, now I'm actually walking the scene of the crime. Like, okay, how has this happened? What's the first thing the detectives are going to look at and stuff like that? And I'm like, oh shit, I don't know that. I need to figure that out. So that's where the hiccups are.
See, before Sean responds, and I know how he's going to respond because I may have heard the response in the absence of what Dave just said 3 or 4 times already at meetings, just saying. Dave said this. So I know how he's going to respond. But what I wanted to point out is that there are 2 specific kinds of like getting hung up on planning here that I just realized this. Like mine is plot. Mine is like what happens in the scene. And Dave's is what are the details of the scene, which I think are totally different and you need to plan for them.
Yeah, they're for sure totally different. And the thing is,
plot I'm really good at, I think.
Yeah. Dave's great at plot. He's natural. I mean, really, we get on the phone and within 10 minutes we can have a story idea ready to go. Like, I mean, not ready to go, but the seed of something that can be fleshed out, and it happens pretty fast. Plot doesn't seem to be the issue. And we've had this conversation. I don't know how relevant it is to today's show. I don't want to go off on a tangent, so just wrangle me in if not. But what Johnny was talking about earlier is that this is a normal discussion between Dave and I, as far as like you cut where the camera, you're the director of the story. So cut where you don't want the reader to see. If there's something you don't understand or you don't know, then cut the camera and write around it. And so one of the ways that we're trying to figure out how to kind of figure this out going forward, because Dave asked me, well, what would you do? How would you cut this? How would you do that? And to me, it seems really simple, but I can't solve the problem in a vacuum. I need to kind of see specifically what we're talking about. So I said, as you come up with these things, just tag them in Scrivener with comments, and then we could talk about different ways we could have maybe framed that scene. Because I don't think it's the brain surgeon thing. Like if you're not if you're not a brain surgeon, you don't know anybody who is a brain surgeon, you don't want to research what it's like to be a brain surgeon, don't make one of your characters a brain surgeon. Like, that's silly. I think that in the future, once all of our boxes are closed, all of our stories need to be set in the not too distant future, and then Dave doesn't have to worry about it. But it's those little decisions like that, because you don't want those kinds of things to keep you out of the story. And that's the thing. Readers really want a good story. So yes, your details need to be right. You can't look like an idiot, but you can write around what you don't know if you are intelligently framing the story.
In that specific example, because I was trying to put myself in the shoes of Dave writing this scene, and if I had a bunch of cops,
like Frankenstein shoes.
Yes, no, Herman Munster shoes.
Oh, okay.
Although they did have similar fashion sense.
Yes.
Anyway, so I'm trying to imagine a bunch of cops going around a crime scene, and I wouldn't know how to write that either. I'd write it full of cliches and stuff. And I think my solution personally would be not to have the crime scene. I would have a debrief afterward, ideally with a layperson, not another cop. You know, I don't know.
That won't work when your main character's a cop. I mean, you kind of have to.
Well, then you have your character, like you have another character who's like a psychologist working with the police department or something like that, and they're describing it to them, or
yes, you can
the cop would have to be first to the, or not first, but they'd have to be at the scene. They'd have to process the scene.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. Like,
but that doesn't mean that their processing of that scene has to be on camera.
I think it does.
But it
I think
doesn't.
We disagree here. It does.
It doesn't. And we'll go through the draft. Anything like that where you got hung up, that'll be fun to talk about it, because I think this is really just changing your perspective on this. The way stories can be framed in any single way, and that's what makes movies magic. It's like a lot of times they'll shoot way more than they need, and then it's born in the editing room. Like, oh, well, what if we just do this and this and this? It's a slightly different story, and you have tremendous control as the creator.
Yeah, I'm just disagreeing with you completely here. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I think
you haven't tried it the other way. It's one of those things where you just dismiss it out of hand.
Okay, our
write different kinds of books.
Our book opens with a guy walking onto a baseball field and shooting at people. So
what, from you?
It's a little league game too.
Oh, of course
it is.
That may not be the only CI book that begins with shooting children.
It is actually.
No, it's not.
You're right.
I read another.
You're right. Yeah, okay.
Wow. Dave doesn't remember how many books he's had start with
only 2
people shooting children.
He doesn't actually shoot any children though. He shoots adults in this.
No, Dave evolving as a writer as well.
Yes, I'm evolving. I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. But to have, I don't know what the next logical scene would be if it's not the detective. She's working the case. I mean,
right, but she doesn't have to speak specifically of it. I mean, look, I'm telling you, the best way to do this is to get through the draft and then have these, like, have story meetings, like an autopsy. Here's how we could have done this, because it's just about changing your thinking enough to not let that stuff hold you back and get to the stuff that the details. Yes, some readers are looking for those details, but not most of them. And you have to know what kind of book you're writing too. And a lot of that needs to be handled in pre-production. And part of the problem with this particular series is it is a little bit neither nor. It's not quite a procedural. It's not quite removed from reality. So Dave is right. There is definitely reality that we need to answer to in this context, and we can't ignore it. And I'm sure that, some of the scenes that he's talking about, I would have to acquiesce and say, oh yeah, you're right. There's really no other way to handle that. But I think by the same token, there's an equal number of scenes where he could just frame it differently, and then he wouldn't have that issue. I think it's a matter of thinking about it.
It's a different kind of book, because what's interesting is Dave said it's a procedural. It's kind of like a procedural, and Sean.
But it's not a procedural.
That's what Sean's told me. He's like, it's not a procedural.
But see, the problem also is that Dave doesn't read the kinds of books that he's attempting to write. So he's like, no, but you haven't. The other day he compared this to Dennis Lehane. It's not a Dennis Lehane book at all. He wasn't saying we're as good as Dennis Lehane. Just
you guys are funny. Your dynamic is so funny, because Sean goes, Dave hasn't read the kinds of books that he wants to write, and Dave goes, but I have. And Sean goes, no, you haven't. And before Sean explains why, Dave goes, oh, all right.
Well, no. I know where he's going with this. Yeah. I haven't read the exact sort of book we're writing. Because I don't know how many are out there exactly. Like, I don't know.
Well, this was designed as commercial page turning fiction, and Dennis Lehane is a really like he's one of the best, but it's not the same kind of book. It's not, and we don't have a traditional publisher behind us with that book. It's different. This book, for what it is getting into the weeds in a way that Dennis Lehane does and can afford to, but it's not really our playground. And so it's a matter of reshaping that.
This is I don't know that this example is going to hold up because I'm kind of coming up with it on the fly. But in Silence of the Lambs, Clarice Starling is an FBI agent, but it's not framed as a, like they could have framed that as a procedural. They could have had, I mean, I know he's in the asylum and stuff, but once he gets out, but it's not done that way. It's done as almost a psychological thriller that's mainly discussions between them and then this hunt for Buffalo Bill that's happening where they aren't going through. And I mean, you hear about the things that he's doing to these people, but it's not like they arrive on the scene and then, I actually haven't read the book, but the movie isn't a procedural. Let me put it that way. Like there aren't like a bunch of extensive crime scene sorts of things other than discovering.
I think if you read the book, you'll get more insight as to the actual scenes.
But I think that the example still holds up. Like that movie could have been done as a
Yeah, you have to know your tone. You have to know your tone and the threshold of what your reader expects. And that's what I'm trying to impress upon Dave is I don't think his readers, I don't think Collective Inkwell readers are expecting the kinds of details that he's providing. Or that he's really worried about providing. That his focus should be really on the reader experience, and that's it. And there are other ways to achieve that
too, because are Dave's concerns right for procedural? Yes. But
that's not
the right one. And I don't think you agree on this. I don't think you guys are saying the same things.
It's not even that we're not writing a procedural. It's that the people we want to buy the books, that's not the kind of book that they read, because then they're not going to be interested in our rest of our catalog. So we're part of this is training readers. One thing that I don't think is always
Dennis Lehane by way of Stephen King.
And that's fair, but we need more King and less Lehane.
Well, and King does a lot of things that could have been done you could have shown crime scenes in a lot of King novels too.
I try to use that example. Like King wouldn't do that. King would cut. King knows what he's not able to write, and he just cuts. That's what he does. And then Dave said, no, he gets in people's heads. Yes, he gets in people's heads with the shit he knows how to write. And then he cuts. King is a master at the camera. He is a master at being behind the camera and letting the reader know exactly what he wants them to see at any given moment.
I was wondering if you were going to out me.
Oh, yeah, Dave's gay, everybody.
No, not that. Everybody knew that.
No. Wait, what am I outing you about?
Because we had a discussion about Stephen King. You said you were talking about how he talks about the camera.
No, well, you've outed yourself.
I've outed and he's like, don't you remember that part in On Writing? I said, well, I didn't get to that part. He's like, what? Like, yeah, I haven't read to the wedding part of it.
On Writing.
I got to the wedding scene.
So yeah, that's crazy. But okay, so is this kind of where you were trying to go, Johnny, with finishing the draft? Like I don't want
to. They're two different things. I mean, basically, so this is one method of getting hung up. What I was actually, when I was talking about Dave in the current book, I actually meant I don't even know that it's the current book because you haven't given me what it is, but you talked about the most extensive outline that you guys have developed. This was to my point of knowing in precise detail what it is that you're going to do. And before I let you answer, we're looking at moving more into sort of a show running model in the future and stuff for some of our properties. And for those sorts of things, we are going to do more collaborative back and forth with the outlines, with the story shop stuff than Sean and I currently do. Like currently, Sean will hand me something and I'll look and I'll say, well, we'll ask questions. But with the first book in this series, we did do that. We did pass an outline back and forth, and that one wrote really fast.
Yeah, we had a table read on that one where we sat at a table with it printed out in front of us and talked about every single scene and had a conversation about it, recorded that conversation, which Johnny then listened to later before he read.
But my tendency is to look and say, you know what, I'll figure it out. Like I have the basic idea. I have the largest scale. I'll figure it out. And increasingly, that's not a good idea because I am trying to find out along the way. And what I'm running into right now is it is getting quite complicated. We're reaching the climax of this entire series, and I have 4 groups of people who are trying to, like, I need to get them together. There's a lot of secrets. Like, I don't know how much you're seeing, Sean. I don't know if you read today's stuff, but it's like this person knows this, and this person's trying to make this person believe they know this. And so I need to sketch stuff out. And it would be so much more efficient if we just figured this out from the beginning and then stuck to the outline, stuck to what's in Story Shop. And so when I was talking about what you guys are doing, you talked about your current outline is like the most developed outline that you guys.
Yeah, Dave kicked ass on this outline because we started it with the first book in the series. That outline was pretty developed. Dave had, I don't know if anybody listening remembers this. This was about 6 months ago. And Dave was really ready to write this. So that outline was pretty solid. What I had asked Dave for was basically a 3-act structure. Here's what's going to happen in the story. And then I'll turn that into 40 sentences, as I called it. So basically here's 3 acts, and then here's the basically 40 chapters or so that are going to happen in the book. And Dave gave me beats that were about 5,500 words. So there was a lot of words there, but there wasn't a lot of story. There were a couple of chapters.
There's more than that because
No, this is the first one.
Okay. I thought you meant to say. Okay.
Yeah, no. For the first book, it was about 5,500 words, but there wasn't actually a lot of story there for that amount of words. There were a couple of chapters were almost fully written out, and then there were a couple of things that were like, and then they go somewhere, and it amounted to maybe 5 or 6 chapters, and that got spread out to 40, and that was a lot more labor intensive and took a lot more back and forth. This time we met for a story meeting. Several story meetings. Actually, this one was story meeting heavy. We had a lot of story meetings, and then Dave went in and basically he did the 40 sentence stuff all himself, and it was really involved. And he had the A story, and that was about 5,000 words, but it was all story. And then another 5,000 words for the B story. Again, it was all story. So put those together, and we have a 10,000 word outline that was really heavy on beats and not fully fleshed out sequences like in the first draft or in the first book. So this outline is just kind of bulletproof. You look at it, and there were a few things to go over, but mostly that story wasn't just there in an overall 3-act structure, but it was really there scene for scene, note for note. There's still enough to kind of explore as you go through, but it was a really fleshed out outline, which means you could sit down and write. And that's great because, as Johnny alluded to, we're moving into a production model. We need to be able to, like, that's kind of a baseline outline going forward. And yeah, Johnny, you'll shit your pants at the one I started working on today. That screenshot I showed you, you're going to love it.
So basically, if anybody's wondering what I did here is, so after the first book, I had to write the last 2 Karma Police books. And
rewrite the 4th one because something's changed.
So that, I mean, and that was a lot of work, and
that was painful, right? Because you just wanted to go to the next book in this series.
Well, yeah, and it wasn't going well because there were all these things that we wanted to do and things I planned for the series, but I don't know that the series really, ever really took off to earn that. So I had to change some things up. And have like really good payoffs for everything. But all the while I was like thinking about this other book, New Jersey, the second book, New Jersey. You'll get the joke when the title eventually comes out. And I basically was like every time like I had another idea for the book, I would just write it down in my journal and just keep writing more ideas down. And like eventually this story was forming. And then when I was ready to actually sit down and write it, I sat down and I essentially divided the story into, because there's really 2 main characters in the series. There's a detective and there's a vigilante, and they have their stories come together, but they also have separate storylines. So I basically treated it as 2 different stories, and I went through the detective story. I think I actually went through the vigilante story first. I did that one first. And I wrote it like I was just writing the book, but without any of the scene details I would normally have. I'd have like, beats and stuff and maybe a little bit of dialogue here and there, but essentially like just thinking out the entire story as the book and just writing all that, how I see it unfolding, part by part. And then I went back and did the same thing with the detective.
Yeah, it's perfect. The way Dave's outline worked, the dialogue was only there if it served as a beat. Like it's just as fast to write out exactly what they said with quotes and everything as it is to explain that they said it. Right. So it drives, and you can read the outline for this book beginning to end, and it's not the same experience as reading the book, but the story's there. Like, all the main things that happen. And I think that's the point. And if you can get there, you want to do everything you can to get there, so you don't get mired. You don't have really hard projects that just want to kill you. And both at Inkwell and Realm and Sands for a while now, we've had these projects that are just really labor intensive. And a lot of it is because we're closing boxes. A lot of it is because we have to revisit old worlds that we're not as familiar with. We don't really remember. Tomorrow Gene was really hard for that. Yeah. And so I think that everybody writes a little bit differently. In collaborative relationships, my relationship with Johnny and Dave are different. My relationship with myself is different. So whether you're collaborating or whether you're a solo author, you really want to look at your systems over and over and over and refine them and ask yourself the questions. Why did this book go fast? Why did this book go slow? Why was this fun? Why was this not fun? Because Johnny said something I think really insightful, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago, that really stuck with me through a lot of planning that's been happening. And I don't remember exactly how it came up, but basically we were talking about our word counts, and we're redefining what success means to Realm and Sands. And he said, look, 5 years ago, we were writing X, and this is how fast we were going, and everything has changed. The business has changed. Our readers have changed. Our focus has changed. All of this has changed, and yet we're doing the exact same thing that we did then. My role is exactly the same. Johnny's role is exactly the same, and kind of the counts are the same. And so that's weird. Like, why wouldn't we evolve? Why wouldn't we adapt? And that's been really on my mind ever since. How do we change our behavior because the business has changed and our storytelling has changed? And now, knowing what we know, if we were starting today, we wouldn't do exactly the same things that we're doing. We wouldn't do them that way at Realm and Sands. We wouldn't do them that way at the Inkwell. So why are we doing it just because we've always done it? That's pretty stupid.
That's the ham story. Story.
We've told that on SPP, right?
Yeah, I'll just tell it really quickly in case you haven't heard it in your one, because now I've opened the box.
I love this story.
It's the story, and I've heard this a bunch of different places. The story goes something like this. The people are at a holiday meal, and somebody's in the kitchen, and they see the person who's preparing the meal cutting off the last, like not half, but like the end piece of a roast. And they're like, well, why do you do that? Like, and he said, I don't know. My mom always did that. And then the gets curious, and they go to 3 generations or something. And then they finally get to great grandma or whatever, who says, oh, well, I did that because my pan is too small. So, it's like they think that there's a reason you just keep doing things the same way. My actual specific example referred to the changing roles within our company. So it may not be as applicable to you, but if you are at a different stage where, for instance, maybe you have a bigger back catalog and you are doing more promotions and networking and stuff, then it doesn't necessarily make sense to say, okay, well, I used to be all production and no marketing, and now I'm to just say, okay, well, I need to keep producing at this rate, and then it doesn't work out. You're killing yourself. The words aren't coming because you're burnt out. That's the sort of thing I was talking about. Is it just doesn't make sense, especially if we're going to start doing a show running production model where words will come from our ideas, but not necessarily directly from my fingertips.
Right. And it is a different way of thinking. And I think it's that adage that what got you here won't get you there. And I don't think that as a company, we have often enough, and not just as a company, I don't think as artists, we have taken a step back enough and asked us that question. What got us here isn't going to get us there. So what will get us there, and how do we need to be thinking differently about it? And we have to aggressively pay attention to the evolution of our process. Yes, it will happen naturally, but the more intentional you are about something, the better your results are going to be. So it makes sense to, after a book is finished, say what worked about this really well, because we want to do more of that, and what didn't work so well, so we can stop doing that because it's getting in our way.
On a side note, I want to thank Adam for he last week or the week before he went through our story, and he put a lot of the details into Story Shop. Like we have character profiles and all this different stuff, and like the things I don't remember from the first book, like little minor things, but they're important. Like whether or not a character was an atheist or something, little things that you need to remember going into the second book to make these people feel real. Like I'm able to now click on a character and see like details, and it reminds me of things like that I thought during the writing of the first book, because we had that huge space between the first and second book. So little things like I was kind of setting up for future books that I kind of forgotten about, and I was able to like look and say, I got to bring that back in book 2 and make it feel more seamless and coherent. And I really I'm enjoying Story Shop for that alone. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that was really special.
Something cool.
What'd you say, Johnny?
I said I should have made that my something cool, because when I did the beats that we were talking about, where I was trying to figure that stuff out, like my default is to just do them as I'm going, because I'm writing anyway. Like that's my mode. And I got in and used Story Shop as a creator for the first time. I've always just taken Sean's beats. So that was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, it's been really, really awesome. Well, let me stick with the Adam thing for just a second, because I think this is was a really good process for us. I know this isn't a process that can apply to everybody, but maybe some people, if you have even if you don't have Story Shop, if you have a catalog, if you have an author assistant, because we had Adam read the book and basically just read it and tag 100% of the things that he thought Dave might need to know, or that I might need to know at some future point. Just tag them, and then take all those notes and put all of those things individually in Story Shop. And now it's as simple as searching for us. So if you have an author assistant who can do that, well, I don't know if it would work the same in Scrivener, because it's not searchable in the same way, but some way that could make you kind of a Bible that makes it easy for you to go through. Like that's been great for us. And for a lot of the projects that Johnny and I have coming up, like we aren't going to hit the beam again until we have that. It's just too hard. It's like we're at the point with the beam where there's too much world out there for us to understand what we've already done.
Literally reread.
Yeah, we made too big a mess. We can't. We made too big a mess. So we need to be able to understand that stuff. So that was really cool to be able to have that. And then I've been using Story Shop a lot. And in the new project, it's been really fun, because I'll make something up and think, oh, well, that's a location I'll need later. And then I'll just go ahead and click over, make the element real quick, and then know that I'll fill in that blank later, but it becomes part of the story. And that's been really, really cool. So yeah, I'm grateful for the tool.
So what do you, oh, and by the way, big Story Shop update coming kind of soon, just saying. I don't know exactly when, but anyway, what do you think is the difference between, because it is interesting, and I have my thoughts on this kind of, but this was kind of a weird sideways epiphany for me, that I guess I've always seen the outlining, the planning stage as fundamentally different from the writing stage, in terms of like, I guess in some part of my head, I thought you can't have enough control at the planning stage to like think through all the details, that stuff has to come out organically. And plenty of times it does, but it's, I don't exactly know how to explain it, but really,
well, I think there are both. I don't think you can ever get everything in an outline, and I don't think you can ever pants everything and have the structure that you need for a really truly rewarding reader experience. I think there's got to be some kind of sacrifice in the middle. So the true like holy grail of all of this, the unicorn, is a 50-50 thing, where you have an outline that gets you 50% of the way there, then you write it the rest of the way.
Well, that I would have agreed with that, but that didn't work here. And that was always my process, was to fill in the blanks. It feels a little bit more like,
I don't think we took it 50% here. I think 50% is, I think the first book was 50%. I think the third book was maybe 10.
Well, there's a fundamental difference too in the way that you can have that 50%. So you can have skeleton and then meat on the bones, basically. Like that's like you fill in the details. Like the bones are always there, the structure is always there, and then you fill in the details. But then there's also what tends to happen where a character will be created kind of out of the blue, and then the whole thing skews away. So like the first half might be really, really on point, and then the second half has nothing to do with the beats because some shit happened in the middle. And that's the kind of thing that gets dangerous because you can't plan for it. So do you write half of the book and then pause, and then everybody reads and catches up? And if you have collaborative partners, you have to re-rough it out?
Well, I think it depends too. And I think it's harder with series because you have more details to keep track of. You all of a sudden are sending the whole series in a different direction. I think with standalones, the rules are different. I mean, would you agree? Dave, do you think that standalones have different rules than series?
No, definitely. But as to what Johnny was saying, I think the difference for me this time, because a lot of times like we will write beats out and I'll completely like change almost everything. Like whatever we started with is not what we finish with. It's always, I feel, for the better. This time is a little bit different. Like I'm sticking to the beats for the most part, like 90% so far. But also I had a lot of time to think about this, while I was doing that other story. And I think that time is what kind of helped me to feel more comfortable with this story. Like it was like it had time to marinate. It had time. We didn't just like immediately start this and like, okay, let's beat it out. Now let's write it. There was time between where I was like starting all these idea phases like months ago, like kind of like doing the work in the background, let my mind work on it. Whereas I think that time has really made it stronger. So putting a little bit more of a buffer between when you start thinking about a book and when you start writing the book, I think might help. I don't know how much of a buffer you had here.
Okay, actually, I have so Johnny, answer this live because we haven't talked about this at all, actually. But I think we'll be in a place relatively soon where we could implement this again. So we've talked in the past, and we haven't really done it in a long time, but about having an A story and a B story, or having shorts or something that you could jump to. Do you think that there's value in that? So we do take a pause and we say, okay, well, let's figure this out on a story level rather than just pushing the writing through it. And in the meantime, I'm going to fall back to this B story or this short. Do you think that there's value in that?
Yeah, maybe. I had a specific thought on that a while ago and I totally forgot what it was. But I did have this independently, this thought. I think that my pushback on the B story was that it was always, it was additional, right? It was something that like, it didn't actually, because we still got behind, right? Like that was the
right
problem.
Because it's unless it's something else that's in another story that has to be done, then you still have that push and pull because
right. So you need to
start this other thing.
Right. So it'd be like, let's say we're going to write project A, and then we're going to write project B after project A is finished, and A and B are not related. They're not in the same series. They're just two separate projects. Then the only way I think it would work is if I stalled on project A to start writing project B, because otherwise it's like, well, then we're pulling in things that weren't going to be written anyway. We need, in other words, they're all A stories.
Well, okay, what if it's not actual production, but it's something that's more sideways? So I think most artists have some other project, right? So if you're an author and you're working on series A, then you do have series B. So maybe rather than starting to write that, you do some background work, some pre-production stuff. Or in our case, maybe it would be tinkering with one of the scripts because, okay, I have 2 days before I could figure this out. So maybe I devote that into working on this script that's in various states.
It's the same problem. So for me, a lot of this was time pressure because, I mean, again, not to, because I guess I annoy people when I mention word counts, and I annoy them even more when I say that I'm not doing very well and it's a lower word count, but whatever, I'm going to do it anyway. So if I was trying to get 6,000 words a day, and I'm trying to bring that back for the reasons that we were discussing earlier to like somewhere between 4 and 5. But some of my days where I felt like I was just really beating my head against the wall were still 1,500 or 2,000 words, or there were some that were less, but I was never under 1,000 on a day that I actually wrote something. And so it would be really easy to stop and say, okay, well, I got 1,500 to 2,000 words. That's awesome. Let's do it again tomorrow. But that's not the way I felt because artificially it was a falling behind. You know, it had to do, if the 6,000 goal was never there, then the 1,500 or 2,000 might have felt great. So that's exactly the problem right there. And so if we have another project we go to, that's awesome as long as we've planned for it. But if we have a production schedule that means you need to get this much done in this period of time, and any delay on that project puts you behind, that's the problem right there.
Well, I know you haven't seen all of the details on it yet, but the new production plan, basically it turns it into psychology. So we don't actually owe material for publication so much as to buy ourselves freedom. So it's just a different game of mental trickery. But like if we wanted to bounce to shorts, for example, we could, because those are I like shorts because they don't take up any space, right? The idea of like starting the dream engine for 3 days as a B project is a horrible idea, right? But
maybe and maybe not. I could almost see alternating weeks, as long as it wasn't a day or two, but I could see that.
Really?
You wouldn't get too far out of the groove, but it'd have to be a good system. You'd have to write one and then think about the other while you're writing. I could see that, because in a week, I'm not really going to lose too much momentum. But the psychology, like, let's close this up, because everybody's like, we're getting in the weeds of our process a lot. And
yeah, but that's interesting. I think if we were able to nail that, that'd be something that'd be really cool to share. Let's talk about that, not now, but later.
Well, oh no, I totally agree. But I think my point on all of this, and this is also true of the alternating projects and the time pressure thing, and the 1,500 words could feel great under different circumstances, is no matter who you are, finding a way to work within your boundaries and give yourself a break to the degree that it's permissible. But what I mean by that is, there's a real fine line between giving yourself a break and just being an asshole slacker. Like, it's really easy to be like, oh, I'm going to give myself a break today and I'm not going to do any work. That's not the same thing. But if you do put a lot of pressure on yourself, and it is taking something that could be an achievement and knocking it down to a feeling of disappointment and, boy, I really did poorly. Because just let's be clear, the 1,500 word example that I'm talking about, which again, I know like some of you were like, oh, boo-hoo, whatever. But my point is, that's really small for me. Like that, those were good words. Those weren't wasted words. It's not like I wrote 1,500 words of shit. I advanced the story that far. And so it kind of sucks for that to feel bad, specifically because there's an external thing that makes it feel bad, i.e. the deadline, the expectation. So working within, setting your expectations in a way that works with your psychology rather than hurting you might be a good big picture way to look at this.
Right. It's just positive versus negative thinking. We're going to do a whole webinar on that. Dave's going to lead us
What?
on positive versus negative thinking. Are you ready for that?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
I think I know which one's going to win.
Carol says today's show is quite inspiring for a different set of reasons. It's good to feel normal and learn that even full-time writers are struggling with the same stuff I struggle with. Kate Morgan says, this is so timely for me going through this right now. Queeve asked, do you think beating a book out and then leaving a gap between writing is a good idea then? And I for me, it's an ideal sort of situation. I suppose it depends on stuff like deadlines and how many books you feel comfortable.
Well, I think it's just a matter of getting ahead. That's exactly what we've been talking about now, is getting ahead enough that shows are in pre-produced like packages ready to go. So I painted this picture for Johnny on Tuesday. Like, won't it be awesome when we're all like with our freedom, and then we can go to a library of packages and say, okay, these 6 different projects are totally ready. Any of them could be written. The pre-production is done. I feel like writing that one and pulling that off the shelf and kind of having a story meeting to refresh ourselves about it. What is this? And then just go. Like, how cool would that be?
I think if we had stuff written out, for me anyway, if we had stuff written out that far in advance, I would most definitely
interest.
change. I'd change stuff all the time. I don't know how much of a benefit that would be for us. I'd be like, oh, that was 6 months ago. I thought I got something so much better than that now.
It boils down to know thyself, I think.
Yeah, always, for sure.
So this is this feels like a fertile ground for more topics. If you guys really liked any particular aspect of this, you'd like to see us flesh it out, shoot an email to Heather at help@sterlingandstone.net and let her know, because I could see somebody being like, well, there's that one thing you guys kind of talked about as a thing, and let us know, because this felt like a good episode, but it also felt like there's a lot of stuff packed into it.
Yeah, agreed.
So thanks for listening to the Self Publishing Podcast, and we'll see you folks next week.
Thanks, everyone.